Welcome back to Where in the World, where we have real conversations with young professionals about life and career, all while attempting to guess where in the world they are. We'll learn something new about our guests and what it's like to forge your own career path as a young professional. And when we say young, y'all, we're really talking about a state of mind. You'll learn by watching this web series that your career will take many dips and turns over time. And just when you think you've made it, you might have to scrap it all and start from scratch. Sometimes that's the way it goes. We ride the tide. I am your host, Clary Johnson, and I'm joined today by Chynna Monforte from Los Angeles, California. She is the founder and CEO of Monforte Studio, where her team specializes in branding and web design. I had the pleasure of meeting Chynna at Squarespace Circle last year, where I had the honor of speaking. Chynna was hosting a workshop about creating radical legacy, and that conversation took us deep, y'all, real deep into self reflection about our life experiences and what inspires our creativity. We also talked about our purpose and what legacy we want to leave behind for the next generation. Well, I walked away from that conversation feeling totally empowered and motivated to continue creating with this newfound sense of purpose. So, we're going to bring some of that juicy conversation here today as we learn more about Chynna, her life, and the radical legacy she's creating. Now, the big, hairy question we're asking today is how do we craft a meaningful career and create a radical legacy as young professionals? But before we jump in, let's do some housekeeping. This is a mini web series game show. The questions will range from standard interview like questions to more personal questions about our guests' careers. You'll notice we're both here today with different backgrounds. In between questions, we'll each have an opportunity to guess where in the world the other person is. The first person to guess correctly wins. Our guests can ask for yes or no clues or really any kind of clues along the way. And our audience can also help out by asking for clues as well. So please join me in welcoming Chynna to the stage. What's up, Chynna?
Hello, 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 hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, of course. Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I remember leaving your workshop feeling so inspired and thinking, how did she do that? You didn't lecture, you didn't show 1,000 slides, you simply asked really powerful questions. So, my goal today is to engage you in a dialogue and ask some powerful questions that can get our listeners thinking differently.
Love it.
We're in two different time zones at the moment. You're in Los Angeles, my old stumping grounds, and I'm here in Chicago. Today, we're going to unpack how we begin to think about the legacy we want to create as young professionals. I love this topic because most of us will have a moment in our careers where we'll say, does what I'm doing even matter? Like, I want to do something meaningful. I've definitely had a moment like that, several moments. And so I'm looking forward to hearing more about your legacy and the radical legacy that you're creating today. So bef- bef- before we jump into our legacies, let's start out with our most common interview question, which is tell us a little bit about more about yourself and your background.
Yeah, so I was born in Alaska and raised in Los Angeles. And I think that is something that I hold very close to my identity and the way that I carry myself and the ways that I relate to the world around me. Um, I come from a first generation Mexican Guatemalan family. And as a in my professional life, I've worn so many different hats. We'll get into that and we'll talk a little bit about that too, I'm sure. But really, everything from managing a pharmacy inventory to being an artist assistant, a teaching artist, um, running a studio for an artist, working in galleries. So lots of different experiences in my background in that sense. And really, I think what's just tied all of it together has been um, my love for creativity. So
Yeah. Um, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that thread, right? Of how all of your experiences, when you kind of look back on them, I know going through it for me, a lot of times I was kind of going through these experiences, going through these motions, and kind of making these choices about the kind of work that I wanted to do, or the kind of places where I wanted to be, or the things that I wanted to see. And it didn't always feel cohesive, right? It didn't always feel like it was leading in the right direction, or the same direction. And so um it's interesting kind of coming a little bit further into my career and looking back now and saying, whoa, I can actually really see a thread there. I can see some similarities. I can see how all of these experiences were working together and kind of building off of each other to kind of get me into this new space where I am today. And even where I am now is also a new step in that direction. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your creativity and how you found that alignment throughout your career and throughout your history. But before we get too deep, we have to pause and take our first guess of the night. Yes. So, um,
Mm.
I always do the honors of guessing first. And so I'm gonna guess where you are. So first of all, this is a mini web series show. A lot of my guests like to call it a podcast, but we are not on any streaming platforms yet, but we will be. And so I like to describe what I'm seeing, so
Mm.
that folks who and maybe listening to this and may not necessarily be watching can also follow along. So I'm going to actually describe what I'm seeing. So you are sitting in this really cool kind of cosmic space. There, it's black. It looks like there is a. Oh, are we on a set of Star? Sorry, I can't. Hold on, let me back up. It's black. There are there are it looks like a grid, like a gold grid along. There is definitely an arc to this background. So I see there's walls and then it kind of arcs. There are no sharp corners. There are all of the corners that I'm seeing around except for the grid. The grid, there are some like some very distinct squares. So it's just black and then there is a gold grid layered on top. That's on the walls and it looks like on the floor as well. Now, when you move to the side, I'm seeing is it looks like a door. Like think about Star Wars. Think about you're on the Millennium Falcon and you see a door. Like that's literally what it looks like. So I'm just gonna guess that we are on the set of Star Wars.
You are incorrect. But that's all I'll say, actually. That's all I'll say.
I tried, guys. I tried. So I mean, yeah. So we can rule out Star Wars for now, but I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to finding out where exactly you are. But while I try to rethink my strategy here, now it's going to be your turn to guess where I am.
Okay. I'll also describe what I'm seeing.
Sure.
Um, I am seeing what looks like to be the interior of a building. I see a very classic looking fireplace with a white mantle. There are windows. There is what looks to be a door looking outside, and outside we see lots of trees and there's a couple columns. The ceiling is very ornate. There is a gold chandelier, and forgive me, interior design friends, but I believe the ceiling is a tray ceiling. So
Oh,
there's
that's
like
fancy.
divots in it, and it looks like there's more gold and maybe paintings. I can't make it out, but it does look very ornate. And there is a wood floor. Um, and it's giving me like classic living room vibes.
I feel that. I feel that. Um, yeah, this is definitely a home that I wouldn't mind living in for sure. Like
Yeah.
it's homey. It has a comfortable vibe.
Hmm. So I'm going to ask for a clue.
Okay.
And my question is this located in the United States or another country?
This is located in the United States.
Okay.
Mhm.
Hmm. Hmm. Is it, are you in a relative's home?
Um, so no, this is not my relative. However, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some relation in our history, in our
Hmm.
long history. I wouldn't be surprised, but this is not my relative.
Okay. I think that was my guess.
Okay. What did you want to? Oh, you asked me if I was in a relative's place. I am not in a relative's place. Cool. I did give you a clue about this place, but I'm gonna give you another clue. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so the person who owns this place actually built this place um, as a way to leave behind a legacy. So they wanted to inspire other African Americans and women entrepreneurs to really go after their dreams. So the purpose of this home, even though it's very lavish, it's very big, it's a mansion, the purpose of this home was not to be flashy. It really was to serve as a statement for future generations.
Okay. Okay. I'll take that. I'm gonna run with it next round.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, great. Well, let's go on to our next question. So, as you mentioned, we are going to get a little bit deeper into your professional history. So, you shifted around quite a bit in your careers. As you mentioned, you've worn many hats. And you had an early start right after college. So, you worked in patient pharmacy where you managed a hospital budget of more than $1 million, which is pretty incredible. Um, or was that right after college or right after high school? I think right after high school, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
technically I went to vocational school for I think 9 months,
yeah,
and then that was my first job.
yeah. So, after about 5 years in this role, you said you couldn't take it anymore. You decided to go to community college and try out art school. And that launched you on the path that you are on today. Whereas you mentioned you worked in museums, art galleries, you supported nonprofits, you started as a freelancer, and then you launched your own business. So, talk to us a little bit more about some of the thoughts that you had during that transitional period, and your emotional state about leaving what seemed like a seemingly stable job for work that maybe didn't feel as secure.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, I think at that time my mental health was really failing there, and so while it was secure financially and, um, from a career standpoint, it just wasn't secure for my own mental health and my own well-being. Um, and so part of that experience was just, facing like racial microaggressions, having zero work life balance, which, whatever that means, right? Difficult hours and just very little ownership over things, right? And so I remember there was this time when I had these Croc slip-ons that I had painted, or someone had painted for me, and I wore them to work one day because they were super comfortable, and and this is like, mind you, this is in a healthcare setting where, um, regular Crocs are the norm, and this is before Crocs got cool, but I'm wearing these painted slip-ons, and I got made fun of at work by my coworkers and my colleagues, and they were like, "What are you wearing? Like, what is that?" What are those before what are those came out? And so, um, there were those types of challenges that I was facing where I couldn't be just myself and I couldn't be creative. And those were some of the thoughts that I had. Um, and so initially, there was some strife. And then I started to think, well, what is my alternative here, right? If I leave this workplace, I'm leaving a really big safety net for me. I'm leaving behind, um, decent compensation. I'm leaving behind a 401k, full coverage health insurance, right? Um, I'm leaving behind so many opportunities. And so some of those thoughts were really around, okay, how can I start to shift that safety net and how can I create a new safety net for myself? And so one of the first things that I did was I moved into my dad's converted garage, slash like pool house. And that was really meant so that, I could quit my job, start taking classes again, and figure out what I was going to do. And so priority one was like, okay, am I in a financial place? Do I have savings? Can I do this? Can I lower my expenses? Um, my second thought was really around reaching out to my network and seeing, who out there can, share resources, can give me advice, um, can just really connect with me and hear me out in terms of what my goals are. And so at that point, I met with, my my unofficial mentor, my friend Sophia, and she ended up getting me, like, an entry-level job at, the Los Angeles County for Museum of Art, which is, like, one of our largest museums here, and so that was pretty much the stepping stones to me kind of figuring out my new trajectory from there.
Wow, that's such an inspiring story. And I see so many parallels in my own career. So I worked in corporate America for about almost 8 years, so 7.5 years. I was actually in LA and then I moved to Northern California. So all of my corporate experience actually was in California. And then, of course, COVID hit. I left corporate America, moved back home, and I moved in with my mom. And for me, that felt like a big blow to my ego because I remember being in high school saying, "I'll never move back in with my mom." Like, not that I didn't need her, but I didn't want to need her. Like, I didn't want to need anyone for that matter, right? I was kind of a lone wolf. I was a nomad. I figured I could do it all by myself. I could figure it out. And to some extent I did, right? I went out, I took care of business. I went, I got my degree, I worked. But there was something missing in that
Mm,
experience. And as you were talking about, a lot of it had to do with work life balance. A lot of it had to do with the microaggressions that I was facing. A lot of it had to do with just not. Really sitting and thinking about how much time and energy and effort that I was putting into um, quite frankly someone else's idea for a business or
yep,
a company or an industry,
yep,
and realizing that if I took that same uh, time and if I took that same amount of energy and effort and dedication and applied it to something that felt very meaningful to me, I could make something. I could build something that could provide value for others. And so I went on unemployment. That was scary
mm,
for me because at the time, unemployment for me equaled homelessness. It really did in my
right,
mind, in my limited thinking.
right.
And I found out quickly that that's not the case. It wasn't even close to the case. Like I was chilling on unemployment. I was I was good, although I was still addicted to being stressed out, right? I always felt
Yeah,
like I wasn't doing enough or I needed to do something more. And so it took a while to actually like shift gears and break out of that thinking, that toxic way of thinking, so that I could enjoy that next step. And that next step was in retail, right? And I love
mm,
retail. I'm still in retail. I have a part-time job and I really, really enjoy what I do. Um, and it also gives me this flexibility to also dedicate to my creative enterprise, my
mm,
business, and to flex in different ways. And so it can be really scary, I think, to step out from the unknown, especially when you're thinking about how am I going to pay my medical bills? Like, what about that 401k that I feel like I'm abandoning or leaving behind? Or what about all this progress that I've felt like I've made in this on this specific track, only to divert and do something different, right? Um,
Mm,
and so I want to talk a little bit more about the courage that it takes to step out,
mm.
especially when we're stepping into a creative field that feels maybe less stable. But before we do that, I got to know where you are, because man, I mean, where do I even start? Seriously, it's usually okay. So here, I got it. I got it.
Wait, wait. Can I give you a clue?
Yes, I would love a clue.
Okay.
That would be great.
Okay. You are on the right path. You're on
Okay.
the right path.
Okay.
So that's all I'll say there.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's helpful. And it does inform my next question, which is, um, and how do I? So I'm going to ask a question. Um, are we in a real place or fictional place?
We're in a fictional place.
Oh,
Mhm.
yes. I'm gonna guess that you are on the set of a movie or a TV show.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay. Oh, oh, this is gonna be hard. It's gonna be very hard. Okay, cool. All right, your turn.
Okay. Are you in Biddy Mason's mansion?
I am not. I am
Ah!
not.
Okay.
But you are. I mean, no, no, I'm not. But I'll give you another clue about this place.
Okay.
Um, so the owner of this place was an entrepreneur, but also a philanthropist, a patron of the arts, and a political activist.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
that's good.
gonna chew on
All
that
right,
for the next round.
chew on it. Cool. All right. So the next question. There may be people who are watching this who want to pursue art as a career, but they're afraid or hesitant because they're worried about stability. So we just talked a little bit about this.
Mhm.
First, can you describe your day? So give us a day in the life as an artist and an entrepreneur, and then um, what would you say to someone who is interested in art as a career path, but maybe they're worried about stability or what their parents will say?
Mhm. That is real. That is very real. Um, so first, a day in my life. I think I'll preface this by saying, once you are self-employed and an entrepreneur, there is a lot of self-motivation that has to happen. And so if I don't have the self-motivation, um, it's difficult, right? Because there's no one telling me what time I need to show up at work. There's no one, delegating to me. There's no one giving me reports or reviews, telling me if I'm doing a good job or a bad job. I have to have all of that self motivation. And so that's kind of what drives the day to day. But once, the self motivation is down, then for me, it's really about time management. And so learning how to prioritize tasks, learning how to delegate. Um, and I'm a really big advocate for setting up your weeks to make sense for you. So, for example, each day for me may shift and change. So Mondays, they're a pretty light day. I like to ease my way into the week. I try not to schedule any meetings. Um, I try scheduling all my meetings on Wednesdays, and so that really helps me actually prepare mentally, and, for some people, this is a lot. This is, like, just too draining. I mean, you can have 5 calls in one day, and it's just too much. Um, but for me, it it also gives me flexibility to, have, like, a full day, like, Tuesday, Thursday to just create, to just do what I need to do, um, and then Fridays, I like to take it easy. So for me, it's like every day looks a little bit different, but my weeks are more or less structured like that, um, just to kind of ease my brain a little bit. I feel like it's difficult when you have, so many things to focus on and so many areas of business to work on, and managing that with being creative too and getting into a creative flow is just, it's hard to, for me personally, it's hard to kind of set that focus and have different focuses throughout the day versus like, okay, this whole day I'm going to dedicate to this. So that's a little bit day to day. Um, and then second question was for anyone interested, but nervous about what their parents may say or about financial instability. Um, I would say one is like avoid avoid art school, avoid trying to do that immediately. Um, number one is that. Try like a community college, a junior college, a vocational school, something that is a little less expensive. And the reason why I say that is because that time is really gonna give you the flexibility to dip your toes into different areas that you wanna explore. And that's crucial for young artists is just figuring out, "Okay, what is my lane? What do I enjoy? What do I wanna talk about? What do I wanna create about?" Um, so going to, like, a community college is really helpful for that and figuring that out. Um, in terms of the stability, I think parents will say what they will say. I come from, again, first generation, um, family, and I don't think that we see enough of us, like, being successful in the arts, and there's also just a societal stigma where we think, like, starving artist is the norm, and so, one I would say is don't fall into that. Like, there are so many creatives, so many artists making a living, making a good living, and making money, um, and it is a real job, so don't let anyone tell you otherwise, um, but, just learning ways around navigating that financial trauma, um, and just also knowing that, it is possible to make a real living in the arts, and just because we don't see it right away, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? So there are like business owners of color, there are entrepreneurs of color, queer BIPOC of color, just folks across the board that are making it in the creative field. Um, so it's real and it's possible. And, don't let anyone tell you otherwise, even if it gets hard.
Yeah, I mean, what I love so much about your response is, I mean, here's the reality. Any career path you choose, unless you have someone, you have allies and you have people who are intentionally promoting you, there's gonna be challenges, right?
Yep.
Any career path, right? So even if you decide to become a doctor, or even if you decided to become a lawyer because you think that those are the careers that are going to make you the most money, um there are starving lawyers, right? Like, there are people who are still struggling to get out of debt because their college education was $400,000. So with that being said, um I think it really does come back to, you're presented with the challenge. What's worth it to you? Like what challenges are worth it for you to overcome and to face and triumph over, that what's going to feel meaningful, right? um and so, I agree. I would encourage anyone, if you are interested in the arts or if you're interested in creating something, just start by doing it, right? Just start
Yeah.
by trying things out. And you can do that right where you are. I'm definitely not advocating for pick up and leave your job immediately and go and start,
Yep.
your own enterprise. But, start now. Start diving into the things that you're interested in. Read books, take courses, take classes. um, get the kind of software and tinker around with it. Teach yourself. I know, even for me, and you and I, we both have this in common, China. We both build websites, but I never went. I wanted to go to art school. I wanted to go to some kind of creative academy where I would learn typography and how colors work together. And once I started actually looking at those programs, I realized that I was doing most of this stuff already. And
Mm,
so, start where you are and give yourself permission to explore and try
I
something
agree.
new.
Yeah, and, you know, there are so many, like, motivational resources out there, books and podcasts that will tell you, "Oh, quit your job, follow your dreams, and just do it," and sometimes it's reality, sometimes it's not, and I think, something I've learned from a friend is just there's nothing wrong, it's very normal to have your stable job and start building on the side, or have a part-time job and build on the side, and so that's also a possibility. I think it's about what ignites you and what gives you passion, um, or what you're passionate about, and so, you know, if you're working, a 9 to 5 and you have 0 kind of energy left in you to build, versus if you're working a 9 to 5 and you can't wait to get home to work on this one thing, that's a really good start too, and just like you said, getting into the flow of creation, taking online courses. That's what I did. I took online courses, um, around the things that I was passionate about, and I've also learned about myself along the way, why college never worked for me, why I never finished school. Um, my learning style is different, and that's fine, and so there's other resources, I think, and other ways around it too.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there is no way around me figuring out where you are, because I just, so we're on a movie set, right? So we are on a movie set, and
TV show. TV show.
TV show. We are on
TV
a
show.
Oh, we're on a
Yes.
TV show. Well, I mean,
I'll show you the door again.
gosh, this is going to be tough. Okay, so we're on a TV show. I'm going to try to narrow this down, right? So we've got the big, what, six? We've got cable television, we've got Netflix, we've got Hulu, we've got HBO, and we've got Disney Plus. I don't know if that was five or six. And then we also have Peacock. Okay, sure.
Mhm.
Um, can I find this show on Disney Plus?
Um, I don't think so. No.
No.
No. No.
Well, actually, that answers one of my other guesses that I was gonna get. Give me another clue about this place.
Okay. Um, I will say that we're on a ship of some kind.
We're on a ship.
Of some kind.
Okay, because it could be a spaceship. It could be a ship that's in the sea. It could be. I mean, those are really the only two types of ships, right?
Maybe.
All right. I'm
Was
gonna
that too vague?
I'm gonna I'm gonna have to ponder that for a while. But while I ponder, I'm actually gonna give you a clue about this place, and it's in alignment with what we've already been talking about. So I found it kind of cool.
Mhm.
So the person who built this place, um, she when she was working for her previous employer, she began to develop an experiment creating her business. So she was creating her business while she was working from her previous employer, and in fact she was inspired by the work her previous employer was doing to create her own um, her own product line.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I feel like I should know who it is. So, um, is this person still alive?
This person is not alive. No.
Okay. This is a tough one. This is a tough one. I love research and history and like diving into archives, and I either know this person and don't know it or I have no idea and I would love to read more about them.
Yeah. Um,
Um,
I would say it's likely that you know this person. And I must be doing a really good job because I think it's kind of tough to give clues without giving it away. I will give you another clue based on your last question, which is when this person passed away. So this person passed away a little bit over 100 years ago.
okay. How is it not Penny Mason? um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna need more time. Can
We
I phone a friend?
if if we had friends in the chat, we definitely would phone them. Um, However, no friends in the chat as of now. However, go ahead and take a guess. You can guess where I am. You can guess a state. You can guess, you know, would you like to
Okay.
guess what state I'm in?
Are you in the South? And I ask because of the columns.
Yeah, yeah. So I am not in the South, but you are, um, you're not far off
Okay.
in the direction of your thinking. But we are not South.
Are you East Coast?
We are on the East Coast, yes.
Okay.
All right. So for our next question, your brand revolves around this idea of creating a radical legacy. And in fact, if anyone is watching the show, definitely go check out China's her team's website, which is monfort.studio. The first thing that you'll see is we're creating a radical legacy. So, can you explain that term for us? Radical legacy. Really break it down for us. What do we mean by radical? Or what do we mean by legacy?
Yeah. So that is our first ever trademark was that tagline. And that's just because we stand by it so firmly. Um, legacy is the obvious. It's the one thing. It's making your mark on the world. It's leaving a lasting impression. Um, it's making change. But for us, where the radical comes in is looking at how we can change from the generations before us. And so part of that is, we may be first generation to this country. We may be first generation entrepreneurs. We may be first generation artists or creatives. First to come out in the family, first to first to go to college or create generational wealth. Um, there's so many firsts that what makes it radical is that you're able to do that and um, live authentically and as yourself and in your values, um, and really just change kind of the narrative and the perspective for others that's really what it's about. So it's, in a sense, it's really self-liberation that then creates a legacy for yourself.
Mm. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I see there's this combination of the legacy, which is the impact. What I like to call it, like kind of like the thumbprint that you leave behind, and then there's
Mhm.
this radical part. So it's kind of like the difference between a hole in the ground and the Grand Canyon. I feel like radical feels very big. It's very there's it touches a lot of people. Sometimes when we react radically, there is even a sense of resistance there of about
Mhm.
like on the other side, right, of kind of a it feels like a breakthrough. It feels like going against the grain. It feels like um really like making a change. And I remember times when I was in class, in high school or in middle school, and you'd always get this question about what do you want to do when you grow up, and you always have that one person in class who is like, I want to change the world. Like that feels radical, right? That feels very like big. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about what are some practical steps that we can take towards creating a legacy that's radical. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'm I'm curious to hear more about how we can really start to think differently,
Mhm.
because I find that if we want to do something big, if we want to make a big change, it requires a total shift in our thought process, in our belief system, and it requires a kind of bravery and a kind of courage to really step out and do the thing that you're afraid to do. We talk a lot about what people say we can't do, but a lot of times what holds us back is not necessarily what someone else is saying that we can't do. It's the narrative that we're telling ourselves. And
Yep.
so I'm excited to like talk a little bit more about that, about how we can change our mindset there.
Yeah, definitely. That's I wouldn't put it any other way. A lot of it is fear and imposter syndrome and navigating that and learning how to conquer those fears and kind of go for the thing that you wanna do regardless. Um, yeah, and part of that mindset shift, I think, is changing the way that you think about failure. And so, um, for me, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, there is no such thing as failure. There's only growth. And it's really about experimenting and um, learning from all of your experiences, whether they were good or bad, and then going forward with that. Um, and so, to touch also on imposter syndrome is a lot of it comes from the fact that we don't see ourselves represented in the spaces that we want to be in, and and experiences that we've actually had. So imposter syndrome can be linked to like systemic racism, to wealth and class, and that those are real things, right? So while we feel imposter syndrome internally, we also experience it in our day-to-day lives and in the real world externally. Um, and so it's very I feel like it's easy to get caught up in those fears, right? Like everything's telling us it's not safe for you to do these things.
Mm.
And so that mindset shift is really around, okay, how can I be audacious? What can drive me to actually do the scary thing? Um, and just see it as an experiment, right? Like, um, I'm not saying don't be safe out there in the world, but what is the worst that can happen when you're trying to chase a dream or be creative or um, start building what you want to build? So that's some food for thought.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate what you said about there is no failure, there's only growth. Because I did some research, I was doing some journaling quite a few years ago about failure. And I actually found that the Old English definition for failure is not what what we mean today. So when we say failure, we mean that you tried and you didn't succeed, right? The Old
Mhm.
English version or definition of that word means that you didn't try at all.
Yeah. We should go back to that because that's real.
Yeah. Um,
100%.
that kind of blew my mind, right? And that how this word has kind of transformed over time, and how we've given it this finite kind of you failed, because it's true. Maybe I didn't succeed at what I thought was going to be the outcome, or what I
Right.
thought was the goal, but I succeeded in learning something new, right?
Right.
And in recognizing that I've succeeded in learning something new, I've succeeded, right?
Yep.
Um, which brings me to your background, because I don't feel like I'm succeeding right now at guessing where you are. However, I've learned something new. So what I've learned is that we are on a ship of some kind. We are on the set of a TV show. That TV show is likely not on Disney Plus. And so I'm going to guess that we are on a spaceship.
Yes. We are on a spaceship and we are in space.
Yes. Yes. Oh, you know what? I have an idea of where we are.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
an idea of where we are. But I've already taken my guess, so I'm going to have to save it. It is your turn.
Okay. So I know that you are on the East Coast.
I am.
I know that this house or mansion was owned by someone that died over 100 years ago.
Yes.
They are an ancestor. Um, are you, and they were an advocate and a business owner. This is tough. This is tough.
I'll give you a
Mm,
clue. I'll give you a clue.
okay.
And this is a passage from House, and that's House, Houzz.
Mm,
The villagers, noting her color, were frankly puzzled, reported the New York Times in November 1917. Does she really intend to live there, or is she building it as speculation? The people asked. When her neighbors learned that she did indeed intend to live among them, they were stunned. Impossible, they exclaimed. No such woman of her race could afford such a place, the reporter wrote.
okay. Um, was she indigenous?
She was, what do you mean by indigenous?
Is she a First Peoples of the United States?
No, she is not indigenous.
Okay. Is she black?
She is black, yes.
Okay. Is she was she an inventor?
She did invent, yes, she was a creator.
Okay. And she created a product.
She created a product line. Yes, she
A
did.
product line. Okay. I'm gonna sit with that. I'm gonna sit
Okay.
with that.
Would you like to guess more about maybe the state I'm in?
Yes. Are you in upstate New York?
So I don't know if I'm in upstate New York, but I am in New York.
Okay.
I'm not as familiar with my New York place, but I'm gonna Google it. I'll tell you where I am.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's what I'll tell you. The place is located at 67 North Broadway in Irvington on Hudson. The neo Paladin white stucco mansion with a red tiled roof is less than 5 miles downriver from John D. Rockefeller's. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that Cukit, and about a mile from Jay Gold's Lyndhurst.
Gosh. Okay.
The home, the person who built this home intentionally situated her house facing Broadway, although most of her wealthy white neighbors positioned their homes to take advantage of the views of New Jersey's Palisades along the Hudson River. She chose that place because she wanted to be better seen by travelers en route from the state capital in Albany to New York City. And again, all of that information is from House, HOUZZ.
Okay. I'm not
Okay.
gonna Google it. I'm not gonna Google it.
You can Google though. You
I
can.
can.
Yes.
My my inner my inner Virgo is dying from not being able to like guess and win this thing. So
I thought
wow.
about telling you that before we went on air, but then I was like, I'll just wait until we get a
Until
little
they
further
ask.
in. Yeah,
Okay,
I'll
okay,
save
okay.
the suspense. Okay, cool. So, um, so I talked about this a little bit. I remember being in high school and college and talking a lot about the impact that we wanted to make in our lives and careers, but I wasn't so sure of what I wanted to do, right? Or the impact that I wanted to create. And in a lot of ways, it felt like I was making it up as I went along. What would you say to a young professional who wants to create a radical legacy, but they're unsure of where to start because they're still figuring out who they are and what they want to do?
Yeah. I think it is very hard to know where you want to go and what you want to do without some of that wisdom, right? And wisdom only comes from experience. It only comes from trying, like we just talked about, right? It's like you can't be afraid of failure. You have to be really keen on wanting to experiment, wanting to try different things. Um, and that's big. That's big because there's no other way to figure it out, I think. Right? Like, unless you know, unless you come from a family that's going to tell you what you're going to do and you have no choice in the matter, then that's a different situation. But for me, it's really about experimenting and feeling free to do so, um, and feeling free to be yourself. That's huge. It's huge. Once you can be yourself in the spaces that you want to try to be in, um, then you can figure out, okay, how do I this is for me. Now how do I make the impact I want to make?
Yeah. Um, I really liked about what you were saying when you paused and said, well, the experience is really the only way to figure things out. And it's true. It's like
Mhm.
you have to go through it. And so much of us wants to know what's on the other side or wants the blueprint. But the reality is, again, the blueprint is like a fingerprint. It's unique to you, and you learn it as you go. I know there. It feels like there's so much pressure to, as a young person, to know what you want to do off bat. But the reality is that you might even think that you know what you want, and then you get down the line and you realize that it's totally different, right?
Yeah,
Um, and I
yeah,
think we give ourselves permission to change course, and that's okay. That's totally okay.
100%. Evolution. Like we
Yeah.
have to evolve and grow as people. So you may get someplace and feel like you've done it, and then you're a totally different person the next year, the next day, the next month, and it may shift and change. And so, like, learning to get comfortable in transition and learning to be comfortable in not being an expert or not knowing 100% of what you're doing and really take on a role as a learner, I think is a game changer too, right? Like you will shift in your timeline. Nothing is static. I mean, that's the way the earth is.
That's deep. Yes. I mean, so on the show, our tagline, we talk about riding the tide, right? And it's all
Mm,
about that. It's, nothing. we create we again we want to create this blueprint, like we want this sure shot, but the reality is that nothing um in our world, in our reality, in our universe is static, right? It's constantly shifting, it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. There are going to be new factors that come into play. What you want now as a single person may not necessarily be the same thing that you want or need when you have a family, right? And that's okay. That's totally fine. But we have to be adaptable as well, as our environment changes. So, all right.
Yeah.
Um, I have a question.
Okay.
One of my favorite actors, Steve Carell, is he in this show?
Um, he's not in this iteration of it. Um, I don't know if he's in a new iteration. I can't speak to that. I'm not sure. But in this series, he is not.
Oh,
Um, in
interesting.
this chronological piece of this series. So the clue that I will give you here is that the show is it has been around for many, many years, and there are different iterations of it. Yes.
I'm close. I feel it. I feel it in my bones. Okay,
Yeah.
great. It's your turn.
Okay. I'm gonna do some Googling.
Go for it.
Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. 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 Are you Madam CJ Walker?
I am not Madam CJ Walker.
Are you? Are you in her house?
We are in the home of Madam CJ Walker.
I'm
This
like
20
charades.
this 20,000 square foot mansion originally stood on 5 acres. Um Now just under 2, so I'm guessing after some renovations and changes, they 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 shrink the estate. But that extended from Broadway down a sloping hill to the eastern shore of the Hudson River. Construction costs in 1918 were $250,000, or $4.5 million in 2018 dollars. So this article is actually written in 2018. The furnishings and artwork were estimated at $100,000, or $1.8 million today. So, as you may know, this is Black History. Well, we're heading into Black History Month, and Madam C.J. Walker was the first self-made millionaire.
Wow.
And so first self-made female millionaire. Um, and so she actually built this mansion. So this mansion didn't already exist and she moved in. She actually built it. And she built it to not only inspire women entrepreneurs and young African Americans, but also to entertain her wide circle of illustrious friends. She says of this place that she built her mansion not for personal aggrandizement, but rather to convince members of my race of the wealth of business possibilities, and to inspire them to do big things. So
She was creating a radical legacy.
she was creating a radical legacy. Yes, she was. For
Yeah.
those of you who are not familiar with Madam C.J. Walker, she was an inventor. She was a creator. She was a businesswoman. She started a line of hair care products that grew very rapidly, and she faced criticism from the Black community as well as non-Black communities, and she really overcame some challenges. Particularly, one of them that I thought was really interesting is that when it came to marketing her business, a large population of the folks that she was marketing to could not read. they were illiterate, and so she had to find new ways to actually do her marketing. And so she was a really phenomenal woman that I think everyone should know and learn and read about. There is a book about Madam C.J. Walker that I believe I want to say maybe her daughter wrote. I'm gonna look up that book, and when I can find it, I'll share that with you guys. But it's also a book that I'd like to read this year as well. So
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah, that is very, very impactful.
yeah,
And I didn't know that about her marketing, so it's really interesting. I'm gonna also read up on that.
yes, and that. From what I've heard, is in her book, and so I'm looking forward to reading more about her biography. So, um, all right, we're close to the end, but we're not at the end. I have a couple more questions for you.
Let's do it.
A recent article from Great Places to Work had this to say about millennials. I'm sorry, give me 1 second, guys, while I. Perfect. The the more they feel their work matters, the more likely they'll stay at their company. In this case, nearly 3 times more likely. What do you make of that statement?
And this was about millennials.
Specifically, millennials. Yes.
Yeah. I think this is true of like the general millennial pursuit, um, wanting work to be of importance to them and to make impact. And at the same time, I think that as we're seeing Gen Z come into the workforce and make waves in the workforce, I think that it's not just about, doing work of substance, but I think it's also about like workers' rights, fair compensation, having ownership. I think those things are very important to the generation that has come after us millennials. I'm a millennial. Um, and I'm here for it. I'm here for the advocacy because they're not tolerating it. So I just think that um, as much as we can work at a place where we feel like we're making an impact and like the work matters, at the end of the day, if we're still being mistreated or we're not being paid properly, or with fair compensation, does it really matter? I don't know. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I agree. I think with COVID too, what we found is that people started to wake up and realize that they could. Um, People started to wake up and realize that they could do work that was meaningful to them without being stressed out all the time. I came to that conclusion. I was like, whoa, actually, I'm making the same, if not more, as what I was making in corporate America, and I could actually get 8 hours of sleep if I need it, or I actually enjoy the work that I'm doing, and I'm not. Having migraines and stressed out and just struggling with anxiety all the time, right? I can actually create space. And like what you were saying at the beginning of our conversation, I can control my schedule better, and I can,
Mm.
set my own terms. And of course, yes, as you mentioned, there's a lot of self motivation that comes with that. But I can make a living and be okay.
Yeah.
um and I can have that balance. And before, that felt very far-fetched to me. It didn't feel like a reality, like something that could be achieved. And so, yeah, I think, again, not encouraging anyone to just up and quit their job and start entrepreneurship or start their own thing, but really think about. I always tell people to not only just think about how much money you want to make or where you want to live, but think about kind of, what you want your life to be like, and
Yep.
um, for me, mental health was so important, and so I wanted to definitely start there.
Yeah. For sure. Looking at those values. What is in the life that you want to create? Is your mental health, the top priority? Is your healing top priority? Is it having freedom around your schedule? Is it around, taking care of a family? Like, all of those things should be considered when you're choosing what kind of work you're going to do, for sure.
Yeah. So I guess I'm the odd one out, trying to guess where you are. So we're not on the set of Space Force, but I'm having a hard time. I mean, is this Star Wars? Is it? Are we on a Star Wars spin-off set?
Um, you're not in any kind of Star Wars uh, based world. I am in another star outer space related like franchise.
Or I meant to say Star Trek. Sorry.
Oh, Star Trek. Yes.
We're on Star Trek
Yes.
this
So
entire time.
this entire time. So you were really close for the first one. I was like, oh, okay. Not gonna give it away too soon. Um, but what I will say about this room is that it's called the holodeck. And so it's a room that exists on the spaceship, and particularly in Next Generation. I haven't watched the other Star Trek series, but basically in the holodeck, you can go into the holodeck and you can imagine anywhere that you want to be, and you can do anything in that world. And so picking a place, I was thinking, okay, if I could pick anywhere, what would that look like? And I thought of the holodeck because you can go into the holodeck and literally pick wherever you want to be, and it would form around you. Um, and then, there are scenes in Star Trek where characters will go into the holodeck and they will imagine a different time period in a certain location. They can, do fencing in other worlds. It's just the possibilities are endless. And as my little moment for an Easter egg, our studio branding was heavily inspired by Star Trek and kind of futurism meeting um, indigenous, black, brown, people of color, and just kind of meshing all of that. And so, from a visual standpoint, Star Trek has been a huge inspiration. So, welcome to the holodeck.
Well, thank you for taking us to the set of the holodeck. This sounds really cool, and I love the idea of choosing a place that can take you anywhere, and that's really awesome. I really enjoy that.
Thank you.
um, cool. Well, we're here near the end of our show, and so I do have a couple more questions. Do you have time for maybe two more questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Um, so I didn't want to leave us without asking this really obvious question, which is tell us about the radical legacy you're creating. And then if you can share any tips for us about how we can begin to create a radical legacy.
Yes. So, for us, it is, you know, to go back to just the experiences that I come from. I do not have a degree, so I didn't finish school. Um, and I never had worked at a creative agency before. And so, did we lose her?
I'm still here.
Oh, are you back? Okay. And so, um, part of that was, again, not feeling comfortable in these spaces and wanting to create a space that made sense for me. And so, while that sounds very selfish, it's also how I'm leaving a legacy. And even earlier today, I jumped on a call with a fellow creative, someone that's in another state, and we just met on Zoom. And they mentioned I just graduated ad school. I find myself working in the nonprofit space, and your studio is one of the rare kind of businesses that I see where you're actually bridging advocacy, um, aesthetics, design, art, creativity, and you're kind of meeting both like the advertising world and the advocacy world, right? And bridging those things. And obviously building the table that we want to build, right? For me, it's not about do I get a seat at the table or, you know, any of that. It's more about can I build my own table? Like, who gets invited to my table, right? Um, and so that's part of the legacy that we're building, I think. Um, and it's heavy work. It's heavy work, but it's also it's ancestral work for us. So that's a little bit about that. Um, Tips for other folks to create a radical legacy. I would say start where you're at and think about the past or previous experiences you've had that maybe were or weren't pleasant, um, and thinking about how you could have done things a little bit better, right? So, you know, changing that kind of experience that you had and creating a more positive experience for someone else in the future, and for yourself, honestly. So it's kind of about, I don't want to say it's pulling from pain and trauma, but at the same time, to create a change, you need to see a problem in something and really figure out the solution. So thinking about that, thinking about um, what would you be doing if if money or finances wasn't a part of the question, like what is that change that you want to impact? So that's some food for thought. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's some really a good food for thought to munch on and to think about. I do find, and this kind of goes back to our conversation about failure not, you know, not being kind of the end. It's this idea of those challenges that you had, those hard times that you may have fell on, the experiences that you had that weren't always pleasant or didn't always feel good. What can we learn from those? And how can we actually build and create with that? And I don't want to say trauma, but a lot of times it is trauma. I mean, even with Madam C.J. Walker, she was
right.
born on a plantation, right, to
Yep.
slavery. So it's how do you take that and turn it and transform it into something that um, is positive and transformative for someone else, right? How do you channel that pain into creativity and create something really beautiful and meaningful? So, thank you for sharing that. And that also actually brings us into our final question of the night, which is a question that we ask everyone who comes on the show. And that is, how would you describe success?
Yes, and this is it's such an open-ended and question, like a question that can just go so deep. Um, I really, something that I say a lot is that entrepreneurship is one of the biggest kind of self-discovery transformation processes you could go through. And I always say that building a business is kind of like therapy. I'm not going to say it's a substitute for therapy, but the personal development that arises out of building a business, even as just a freelancer, um, is huge. And so for me, success is literally just riding that wave of personal development and being happy with it, you know? Um, that's all that success is for me. And hopefully, um, while the wave will never end, there will be rest in that process and liberation for others. So that is ultimate success for me.
Yes, well said. Beautifully said. Success is the progress towards self development and just taking all that comes with it, riding that wave. Love that.
Yeah.
So tell our listeners where they can learn more about you. What projects do you have coming up?
Yeah. So we have a feature coming out with collective.com, the accounting platform. That will be out soon. And in terms of future projects, I mean, if anyone is interested in a one-day website, those projects are they have rolling booking, so definitely check us out for that. But to learn more about us, you can check us out on Instagram at Monforte Studio, and definitely subscribe to our newsletter because that's where all of the updates come through.
All right. Well, you heard it here. And with that, we will be out. Peace.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.